Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to By the Horns, a Bitcoin podcast about South Africa. We are back with a returning guest, Handre van Heerden. Handre, welcome to the show. Good to see you again, man. It's been a while. We last saw you at episode 11, I think, and welcome back to the show.
Great to be back, guys. Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Very nice, very nice. Handre is our resident self-trained Austrian economist, and in this evening's show, we're going to talk all about Austrian economics and the intersection with Bitcoin. Am I allowed to use that word in the show, Brandon? Intersection. It's a bit postmodern.
Absolutely, anyway, you can do whatever you want.
As long as I don't talk about globalists.
And the V word.
And the V word. Yeah, anyway. So I've the Riot Act has been read to me. We've got to keep our YouTube presence up so we can't get censored. Anyway, is what it is. Handre, tonight we're going to talk all about Austrian economics. And you're our resident expert, so we thought we'd get you back on the show to chat about it. But before we get into that, let's quickly, briefly tell people about what your career background is and then what brought you to Austrian economics.
So I've got a background in commercial property, and about 3 years ago, in 2018, I bought. I stumbled upon Saifedean Ammous's book, The Bitcoin Standard, which completely changed my life and my career trajectory. So since I read that, I became a Bitcoiner, and Bitcoin and Austrian economics goes hand in hand. It's very difficult to find. So originally, I thought I might go back to university and get some degree in Austrian economics, but then I found out that doesn't exist. So you have to, but there's a lot of great free material that you can get online, especially the Ludwig von Mises Institute website from the USA. All the Austrian economists' writings are on there, and then furthermore, there's some online courses that you can do free and paid. So I've read most of the books, and I've done, I would say, all of the courses available. Saifedean, who's a famous Bitcoiner and Austrian economist, he has a website where you can go on, and I think it's something like $180, and he has 4 courses on there about Bitcoin and Austrian economics, and it's I think it's about 18 lectures of an hour each for each of the 4 courses, so it's quite substantial, and there's a lot of reading material attached. So yeah, I've done all that. I've read up, and then furthermore, for the last about year, I've been interacting with other Austrian economists online, speaking, reading, and writing.
All right. So if a course is not given at a university in 2021, that's pretty much a seal of approval that it's knowledge that the gatekeepers don't want you to know, which means it's probably pretty good. So that's probably going to get a lot of people interested. And if the universities in South Africa or anything to go by, I think the old school model of universities might be falling away, and self-education or online education from alternative sources might be the best way to get a healthy education. So well done for that. Reaching out and finding yourself a way to, educate yourself on this. And Austrian economics, what is it? Is it a school of economics that is only taught in Austria, or what's the deal?
So that name is quite confusing. The first time I heard about it, I was also, what is the economics of Austria has to do with anything? Why would I want to read about that? But anyway, so the reason it's called Austrian economics is just because that the 3 let's call it founding members of the School of Economics coincidentally come from Austria, and the one learned from the other one and the next one. So you start with Karl Menger, who is considered the father of Austrian economics, and then one of his students, Ludwig von Mises, he is the main influencer. So the Austrian economics institute is also called the Ludwig von Mises Institute. He was also an Austrian, and in between them there was a guy called von Bawerk, who is also the famous Austrian economist, and it's mostly because of the three of them, their influence, that the school is called the Austrian school. And in economics, calling the particular school of economics to the area or region where it's from they do that often. You get the Chicago school as well, and it's just called the Chicago school because the University of Chicago and the guys practicing that type of economics, they come from Chicago.
So that's Milton Friedman. Yeah. That's the Chicago school, right?
Yeah.
And that stuff they applied in Argentina under Augusto Pinochet. That was Chicago school economics, which is like quite free market orientated, but there's a subtle difference between the Austrian school and the Chicago school, right?
Yeah, the Chicago school, they're closer to Keynesians than the Austrians, I would say. I don't have a particular interest in Keynesian or Chicago school economics. I don't really. My passion is Austrian economics and the theory behind it, and moving forward with that thought process, rather than a lot of Austrian economists in the like von Mises spend a lot of his time trying to disprove Keynesian theories and fighting against socialism and Keynesian thought, which he thought was wrong, which took up a lot of his time. That could have been spent furthering the ideas of the Austrian school. I want to focus on that rather than spending time trying to argue with other people about what I consider bullshit.
Okay, but we're definitely going to dive into that bullshit now, unfortunately, because people need to understand the difference in these different schools, right? So maybe if you could give us some high-level cliff notes as to what the fundamental differences between Keynesian economics, named after Milton Keynes, John Milton Keynes, from
John Maynard Keynes,
Maynard, sorry, not Milton. John, So Keynes and the Austrian school, like what are the fundamental differences? My understanding is that Keynesian economics is statist economics, whereas Austrian school is freedom-oriented economics. Yeah, what's your take?
What I've heard some Austrian scholars say before is that Austrian economics is to economics like astrology and astronomy, Keynesian economics and Austrian economics. The Keynesians, they have this thing or this idea that the economy is something that's there for the state to control. And, you just press and pull some levers or make some adjustments, and then it will perform like you intend. Austrian economics is much more theoretical, and it comes. The Austrians believe in human action, so they believe that the whole of the economy of the world is made up of individuals acting and deciding what they are going to do every single day, and all the combination of all that action of all the different humans that makes up the entire economy, and that cannot be categorized or controlled because every human acts differently.
So I think the best analogy for this is actually there's a epic rap battles of history. There's a 2-part video on it of Keynes and Hayek having a rap battle, and this explains the difference between Keynesian economics and Austrian economics very well. And one of the phrases, one of the lyrics in the song in the rap is that the Austrians believe that the economy is organic, and the Keynesians believe that the economy is a machine. And if the economy is a machine, it's made up. It's a complex thing made up of a bunch of interacting variables, but ultimately you can model it and you can understand what the outcome is going to be, and therefore you can control it by pulling a couple of key levers. Whereas the Austrians are like, no. The economy is an ecosystem, an organism. And if you change one thing, the unintended consequences of what you do cannot be known. It's like the unseen and the unseen, as Bastiat would say. Like, you don't know what effect you're going to have by changing something because there's cascading effects, like a butterfly effect. And I think that's a much more accurate description of what an economy is. So for example, let's say the government starts handing out welfare grants. And they think, okay, we're going to hand out welfare grants, and that's going to stimulate consumption because people have got more money to spend. They don't plan for the fact that it's going to stimulate consumption of opioid drugs, and people are going to sit in their asses and do nothing and buy alcohol, cigarettes, and drugs and not work.
Yeah.
And that's a side effect that they can't model. Because how do you model how many people are going to become junkies if you hand out free money, And how do you model what that's going to do to your culture? You can't, right?
Yes. So the Keynesians, they call that like externalities. So they come up with some kind of theory. So they say we want to say end poverty or whatever, or so we want to give all the poorest people 500 rand every month, and that's going to solve the poverty issue because they will all have 500 rand a month to spend now. But every other thing that happens except that what we intended from our actions, all that other things that's externalities, and we don't know what that is, and we can't control it. But we know it for a fact that if you give everyone in the country 500 rand, at least they're not going to die of hunger. Now, the externalities can be intense. I mean, they can be a million different things that happen now because, but the Keynesians think that they classify it like you have your intended goal and then you have the externalities, while the Austrians would just say whatever we're doing, it has consequences or effects, and we have to take everything in account, and we have to try and think what all that stuff is going to be before we make any decision. And because the free market is the best system there is, the less control and influence there is on any market, the better it operates. You almost, if you take the externalities into account and just see these consequences, and you go on and think about it, almost every action taken has a bigger negative effect than a positive effect, and that's the reason why that's not mainstream thought is because governments who are in control, they don't want to hear that, and they're actively trying to block and stop people from realizing this. And that's why the Keynesian school is dominant, because all that they're doing is they're coming up with excuses for government intervention. Basically, that's a modern economist's job. But that's what they're paid to do, and that's what they're doing.
That is absolutely the long short of it. Like, that's what it comes down to, right? Like, Keynesian economics is just coping for statism. Like, it's just a way to explain away through highfalutin words, much like postmodernism. Explain away with using jargon doesn't make sense, and eventually it's only the initiated, it's only the priests who understand what is being said, and then they're the ones who have to interpret the word of God to us plebs, because none of us can understand what the hell is being said, because none of it makes sense at all. And that's what you get. You get the system that is built to justify government's action. And just to push back for some people who might be thinking this from something you said earlier, that a free market is the best system on earth. Why do you say that? I mean, I obviously agree with you, but I think let's dive into that point a bit more.
Okay, so one of the Austrian schools theories, it's super interesting. I mean, there's a lot of this economic rules or theories that they have, but one of it is what they call the law of association, and so Austrians start with they think in or try and find a priori statements. So what would it be is you would make a statement. A statement can be inherently true every single time. So one of the a priori statements that Austrians make is in a transaction which both parties agree to without coercion, both parties intend to gain from that transaction. So if you start with that, that statement is inherently true, because if you don't intend to gain from a transaction with someone else, then you won't go into it. Now, I mean, you might make a loss from your previous trade or whatever transaction you're doing, but for you at that stage, the decision that you're making, you're gaining from it if no one is coercing you into making that trade or transaction. So every time a transaction happens on the free market, that transaction benefits both parties. So that is the closest in economics that you can get to let's call it a free lunch, because every time a transaction on the free market happens, both parties gain something from it. Now, if you extrapolate that and you think about it in a bigger sense, the more transactions you get, the more wealth or prosperity you're creating for everybody involved doing those transactions. So what you really want to do in an economy and on any scale is increase the amount of transactions between people to make it because it's basically a free lunch for or let's call it magic creation of prosperity for people. And but if you have a transaction that where one party is coerced into it, that means that one party is negatively impacted and another party is positively impacted. Now, the net gain from the guy who's positively impacted may be more than the net loss of the negative impact person, but that is coercion, or someone being forced to go into a transaction with someone else is net negative usually.
So like carbon credits, right? Carbon credits.
Yes, or like tax.
Yeah, but let's take tax out of it, because taxes, we all know what tax is. There's one-sided there. But a carbon credits is a market that's enforced upon people through regulation. And then they are placing that obligation upon other people in a forcible manner, where they need to pay some kind of premium to provide, say, natural gas or energy in some format to a central authority, but not to another party, meaning that the central authority is just getting all this money, and there's one winner, the central authority, and there's one loser, the person paying that credit. Is that the way to put it?
Yes, exactly. That's a good example. And now, if you're going to look at it, what's the externalities from a policy like that? So, while the Keynesians would call it externalities, let's just call it consequences or effects. You have the carbon credits now. Now someone like Tesla is coming in, and they're gaining or scoring from it, because they are creating carbon credits, which other companies and entities need to buy from them, because they're green. They get a advantage now. But at the end of the day, what are they doing with that advantage? They're subsidizing the 100,000, 1.4 million rand vehicles for the super rich to be able to pay it, to be able to pay less. So now, instead of your billionaire having to pay $130,000 for their Tesla, now they pay $90,000 for a Tesla or whatever it costs, because the carbon credits are used to subsidize that vehicle. So what are you doing? You have a guy in a gas field somewhere in Texas or wherever in his bucky, and he has to pay carbon credits because he actually makes something productive like fuel, and he has to pay the net effect of what he's paying is some billionaire can pay cheaper for his Tesla now.
But also
that's
because
an externality,
and also because I heard, and I don't know the full scope of it, but massive companies like VW, BMW, whoever, who are still building petroleum engines, and they are paying this premium to a central authority, carbon credits, who are then passing that subsidy onto Tesla and them, and now they're the loser. Tesla's the winner, and you were talking about there's no equal benefits there, right? So that's an unequal situation. That's the Keynesian way, I guess, whatever we need to bucket that in. But now they are building electric vehicles to try and offset that. So I kind of get why the government pushed them in that direction. But that's when you go look at Tesla, who lived off these subsidies, and what happens when these subsidies fall away in a unprofitable business? What the hell happens to them? And there's never that equal balance between the two. It's just a central authority trying to balance the seesaw, and you can't do that in a free market. You have to let the free market principles play out, and that's the way I see it.
Yeah. Yep.
And there's other externalities as well, which are, let's say, VW, for example, now stops producing fossil fuel engines, internal combustion engines. And now the whole of Germany invests in solar energy, as they have, right? They put up a bunch of wind farms, a bunch of solar to charge all of these vehicles. and that results in them having less reliance on fossil fuel energy, right? So oil and gas, etc. Except what happens then is their energy grid collapses, the price of energy skyrockets 3, 4, 5x, and there's not enough electricity to go around. And then Tesla or whoever got the benefit of the carbon credit doesn't have to pay back the money to rebuild the infrastructure eventually to bring energy reliance or energy sovereignty back to Germany. The taxpayer is going to have to pick up that bill. And then the middleman who brokers those deals. So these companies that set up the carbon credit trading schemes, like the middleman makes an absolute fortune. These guys all benefit. And these are all the Cantillon class, right? These are guys who went to Ivy League universities, etc. So once again, they're leeching off the productive working class, adding no real value. It's all of smoke and mirrors. And at the end of the day, who's left picking up the bill when your energy system breaks down because you're literally not producing enough energy? And like now the UK this week came out and said they are not going to allow you to charge your electric vehicle during on-peak hours because there's not enough power to go around. Because surprise, 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 there's been a misallocation of capital. And this every time what happens when the government intervenes into a market, it creates misallocation of resources. And this is what the Austrians talk about all the time, is about misallocation. And this is what leads into the next point we're going to discuss, which is booms and bust cycles. And that is driven by misallocation of capital. So when someone has been forced to invest into something, that capital has not flowed to its most productive use. It's flowed somewhere where it's been told to flow or it's been forced to flow. But you've got to pay the piper. Like eventually reality, you can't cheat energy, especially. This is one market you can't fucking cheat because people consume energy. And that's our measure of our wealth really is a measure of how much energy can be consumed, because getting machines to do shit for us is driven by energy. And that's a factor of our productivity. So unless we want to go back to the Stone Age, we need to rely on energy dense resources. And all of this fake demand that's being driven into renewables, as much as I am an environmentalist myself, but if you misallocate resources into renewables and there's not enough energy to go around, we end up with a destruction of our civilization because we have less energy to go around. We can be less productive and everyone goes backwards and it's fucking misery for everyone involved. I don't know. Maybe you want to comment more on the boom and bust cycles, but that's quite a big one.
So the Austrian business cycle theory, the Austrian school is that it's the only school of economics that has any form of coherent theory regarding business cycles. I've heard some current Austrian economists say that they consider the Austrian business cycle theory the crown jewel of the Austrian school. So basically, the theory goes like this. I'm going to try and keep it as short as possible. But if you have an economy that and you start off with the economy that's not been intervened with by any government or monetary policy or anything like that, and like we had before World War I, I was almost 1820 to 1890 is considered like a golden age by the Austrian economists. So if you start off with the economy, say like that, and suddenly you start inflating the money supply. So everyone is productive. Everyone's going on the gold standard, and now suddenly governments and banks, they're creating new money out of nothing. What that does is it increases the amount of claims to current goods and services that there are in the economy. So now the illusion is created that there's more available than there actually is. And so let me take an example. If a certain town were to build 100 houses that year, and everyone in the town can afford it, there's enough people to build the houses, there's enough material to build it. Now, all of a sudden, there's, let's say, twice the amount of money that came in from some authority or in the banks into the economy. Now, suddenly, people that shouldn't have been able to afford a house, they also think that they can afford a house now because they can, because they have the money. And now they start building 200 houses. But in that town, there isn't enough resources to build 200 houses. There's only enough resources to build 100. So at some stage in the future, they're going to realize, oh crap, we've built 200 houses halfway here, but we don't have enough resources to build 200 houses. We only had enough to build 100, and we've already wasted a lot of it trying to build 200, which we're never gonna finish it. And that's when it collapses. The earlier that happens, the smaller the bad economic impacts, or the crash, if you want to call it, it's going to be. The longer you take before you realize that, if you use up all your resources before, and you're 3/4 of a way through or halfway through, and you have no resources left, you're sitting with 200 half-built houses, which is worth 0. And that now, if you extrapolate that example over the entire economy, that's what monetary expansion does. And the earlier you take the hit, or the economy takes the hit and goes back to a base level and starts building again and acknowledges that there's been malinvestment, the least impact, negative impact the crash is going to have on the entire economy. But the longer you stretch this thing out, at the end of the day, there's going to be nothing left, because there's going to be so much malinvestment that it's going to destroy. Well, it's going to have huge negative impacts.
And
the carbon credits left.
And a close analogy to that, Handre. So we talk about monetary expansion and the imbalances that you just outlined, but then there's the suppression side of it. And this, once again, just talks about what happens when there's a central power trying to pull these levers. And the suppression side of it is what we're seeing in Europe right now, in the UK, with gas prices, or natural gas prices. Because through their ESG movements, they had, like in Netherlands, was supplying, double digits natural gas supply to the entire whole of Europe, and they closed that off due to, you probably know why, Greta going crazy or whatever it was, and all these other movements. Now that they don't have the supply, Russia's
do you
providing.
Greta single-handedly shut off the gas supply to Europe?
I don't know, but
I like the theory. I like the theory. I'll run with it.
It's CNN and all the guys as well, right? There's a bigger thing at play. We don't know we know what it is. We just don't know who is running the show. But they've suppressed it. You talked about expanding it and the imbalances that caused, and the suppression is now turning people to go, oh shit, renewable energy actually doesn't work. It doesn't, because energy demand, just like Bitcoin, is always going up. And now they realize the issues that they've caused, and the ESG movement might not be the best thing in the world. And it just shows you that a central authority in the middle is always going to cause imbalances. That's what the collapse of the Soviet Union was all about. That was the essence of it all. And now we're seeing it all over again.
Yeah.
Anyway, rant over.
That's why, my opinion on China is, I don't see them becoming a huge world power. I think they're past their prime, and they're on the way out. The amount of malinvestment, as we just described, in that country, it's insane. The one guy that I know that's also an Austrian economist, he spent 8 years in China, and he's been back now beginning of this year, and he says it's just incredible, all those huge buildings, like with the Evergrande scandal. He says you still see construction and scaffolding everywhere, and new buildings going up, but as soon as the sun goes down, none of those buildings has any lights. It's all empty. So there's a whole ghost city of empty buildings that they still have to fill, but they're still building new ones. And it's just going on, and they're just consuming all these resources from all around the world, and they're doing nothing with it. It's all getting misallocated inside that huge country. And the same way, when the Soviet Union fell, they realized in 1994 that, 1991, that their economy is a total joke. Their economy is about the size of Chicago, the whole Soviet Union. That's going to happen with China as soon. Well, I mean, their economy is the government decides what numbers are going out. It's like Big Brother, that Orwell book. I mean, the government decides everything. That they decide what they want to tell the media or the rest of the world, and what's really going on inside there is going to be shocking when it eventually gets revealed, because the system is unsustainable.
But the bigger thing is, and you're absolutely right, Andre, and the bigger thing is that they've got this closed loop system. And it's very similar to Vietnam and other places. And I've explained this quite a few times to Ricky, close friends and all that, is that you cannot get your money out of Asia. And Asia, I mean, ambiguously, there's certain countries that are free markets, like Singapore, whatever. But because of that closed loop system, money comes in, it's a washing machine, and it stays in there. And this has propped them up to, and people have, analysts, and I hate that word because analysts are all retards, in my opinion, whether they're from HSBC or whatever. They're saying China's debt to GDP ratio is around 360% right now. We don't know the truth because it's so manipulated.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever it is, because of this money always coming in from external vehicles, and even though America or stock exchanges can't let you directly invest in America, there are investment vehicles where you go via Cayman Islands, indirectly through there, whatever. You can't get it out. And the same, there's no SWIFT network to Vietnam for me when I earn money there to get money out back to South Africa. The only way I could do it all those years ago was to buy Bitcoin. And now because of that, it just props it up, and there is no organic measures whatsoever. And now I really agree, the house of cards are starting to fall fast. And but still the supply chain of the world is still dependent upon them. And I believe that there's a lot of alarmism on that side, and things will start working, and that back to normality, and then we'll keep China going. But if the world were to move them away from the supply chain, if they were to learn how to do things themselves, China's fucked. And that's my thesis.
On the China thing as well, I agree with everything both you guys just said, but there's one other component of China that people overlook, and this is where the ESG fanboys can suck a fat one. The amount of waste that takes place because of malinvestment, specific to China, is on a scale that will boggle your fucking mind. There's a billion people there. They are building they're building 100 power plants a year. They're building massive cities 20 years in advance without anyone taking ownership of it, without anyone moving in. There aren't enough people. And this is it's a big country, right? This is the whole Evergrande thing and all of the other real estate bubbles surrounding it is because they will go and build these things from a centrally planned perspective. They'll build out these projects using concrete, steel, glass, plastics, rubber, resources from all over the world that they're getting from the world. They are printing the money for it, paying people dumb enough to give them things of real value, raw materials, for Chinese debt and Chinese printed money that eventually will all be destroyed because it won't be used. You've seen videos of these massive complexes just being destroyed and broken down because no one's in there and they need to make space. And it's all unraveling, like you say, it's coming apart at the seams because they've been lying about it the whole time. But what's going to happen is the debt is going to be written off, essentially, because they're going to default at some point. They're going to keep putting it on the balance sheet until the day that they can't make a payment anymore. And not that they can't make a physical fiat payment or a digital fiat payment, the fact that no one will accept their money anymore because all faith is gone. This is what Greg Foss was saying when we had him on the show. It's credit markets will break eventually when people lose faith, and then the dam, breaks open. And then the sheer scale of environmental destruction and waste, and for nothing, because it's all built off the back of a fiat system of governments able to lie. That's all it is. It's stealing from people who create real value and lie.
Socialist system that they have.
They're lying. They're lying about the underlying value of the yuan or the renminbi, depending on where you are in the world and how they pay you. They're lying about that, and then they are taking resources from you with this IOU, whether it be a yuan or renminbi or a Chinese government bond. eventually they're going to default on that because their system is centrally planned and it's unsustainable. But then the environmental destruction that will be wreaked because of all of that, or has already, the environmental destruction that's already been done, is literally for nothing, because there isn't an honest monetary system. And that's
all
the
those
real
resources have been wasted.
Completely. And the scale of resources that have been wasted. Like if you have to look at like South Africa's total steel output that has gone to China in the last like 30 years, it's like an astronomical amount. It's like a massive amount of steel. That'll all be wasted, right? Like it's so when everyone's having a hissy fit about like the environment and carbon credits and like climate change, they can fuck right off. Go and look at what's happening in China and at like the sheer malinvestment that's taken place. And that is outdoes any like amount of carbon dioxide that goes into the atmosphere. I mean, come on, let's get real. So these guys are like, people who make this argument are fucking morons, to be honest. Like I've lost my patience with them. But
it's the same. It's the same with China were able to do this by exporting a lot of goods and services lately through their what's the Bell Initiative? What's the initiative called?
Belt and Road.
Yeah. Okay. So, but America has been also able to do this for a very long time by the exportation of the dollar, right? So we kind of got to ask, which is faker? You know what I mean?
Yeah. No,
that's a good question.
Yeah. So, I mean, to get to that article that I wrote, Bitcoin, the Bitcoin standard, the future of world currency. I mean, I see as the world goes onto a Bitcoin standard, you don't need these big hard currencies to buy or to do anything. So anyone in the world can use Bitcoin to do anything with anyone else in the whole world. So that enables smaller governments to pop up anywhere. I mean, you can go to the middle of the desert and start something and or sort of like a citadel, and you can use it to pay anyone in the whole world in that currency. You don't need to use dollar or renminbi or euro, and by having that currency in their hands, these huge governments or institutions have the power to do whatever they want. And so that, I mean, that's, I think one of the points that we wanted to get to is how Bitcoin ties in with Austrian economics. I mean, that is one of the close points where Austrians and agree that Bitcoin will have a huge positive influence on the economy and trade in the world. I mean, now we're not even talking about the just the physical changing of currencies the whole time. I mean, if you want to buy something overseas, it's almost, you have to go through 6 or 7 institutions: your bank, your reserve bank, the trading bank, the other country's reserve bank, then Visa, then whatever the other bank that the person you're buying it from uses. I mean, all those people in that whole chain, they all take a small cut. By the time your Amazon purchase arrives at your door, I mean, there's been 15 different institutions involved. That's not necessary. All that you need is yourself, the guy who sells it, and the guy who delivers it. That's 3. And I mean, just the amount of savings from that, it's going to be insane.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. So the movement of funds, right? It goes from that person to the merchant. It goes from that merchant to the acquiring bank. It goes to the card scheme, Visa, MasterCard. It then goes to the issuing bank, and then goes to the receiving merchant. But then it's only settled like days later. There's like pre-authorization, all those things. And you're right, there are cuts all along the way. There's interchange, all these things happening. And then you got Bitcoin. Where a person says to another person, because there's always a person on the end, whether they're a merchant or whoever the fuck they are, and that's from A to B in 10 minutes. 10 minutes.
Instantly with lightning.
Exactly. And it's that network effect. And that's why we're going back to like first principles, which I also think it's a part of the Austrian economics. I don't know. But first principles is the thing of my life, where you look at that and just look at that simple movement of money on that network that's absolutely trusted, and then look at everything that'll be built upon it on top of that. And that's why we're talking to each other. It's that little thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so Brandon and I both work in kind of the payment space, and we've been talking about this a lot recently, like just how fucking archaic the current payments framework is across fiat. Like if I want to enable tap to pay on my cell phone using NFC, the amounts, the barriers to entry in that are beyond like description. Like it's outrageous. So just the sheer cost of implementing it, of getting an app into your that can allow your phone to access the NFC device, and then so that's a whole story by itself. But then being able to like process that payment across the card rail, you're looking at a cost of 3% to move the money, but then you're looking at all these other costs, upfront costs and maintenance costs, etc., that are costing a fortune. So it's just it's a horrific system, and it's never going to make its way to the poor at all, because they won't be able to afford to use it.
It won't. And going back to first principles, it's because it's so. The way I explained to people earlier this week, banks have built this regulatory moat around them, and all these fintechs have to integrate with them in some form or manner, whether it's through some sponsorship, through some aggregator, or through whatever, to try and get onto their rails in order to provide their services to clients. This is the same thing that Revolut did in the beginning, and they're called a neobank. Every single fintech has to do the same. They can't just go there and, here's my wallet. I've got shitcoin 1, and you can send person shitcoin 2. Where's the rand? Where's the rand conversion in between? And that's where the banks come in. But in order to get that rand in between, you have to do a plethora of contracts and integration into specific bank protocol and infrastructure that's only specific to them in order to do that. But then if you were to want to partner with another bank, need to go integrate with their specific systems. They need to go work with their development teams. These things don't take weeks, they don't take months, they take years. And this is why the costs are passed all the way down to the user. Or why, in the world we live in, when you go look at these guys, end of year returns or balance sheets, they're not making a lot of money. They're really not. And Uber hasn't the same. And somehow they've just worked out some market valuation model that just shows they're worth fucking billions of dollars. And they're just not. They're just not. Because if you say your valuation is based upon your end of year return, like EBITDA or profit, whatever, it's like a lot of people fail that specific part. But anyway, now you've got this open network that Jack Morris keeps harping on about, where you don't need these contracts. You don't need these specific integrations to all these people. You just go, I can just use BTC Pay Service open source code. Blue Wallet has open source code. I looked on the sheet the other day, there was about 6 wallet providers who had open source code that you can use to generate your own wallets. You can plug into Lightning Network, you can plug into on-chain, and you can, through that, then find a provider who passes the rands onto the same network. You don't need to plug into them. You don't need to do this integration. Now think about how you can mitigate all these costs down to the user and bring it down to zero. And this is why banks are fucked. They are fucked.
Because they can't go the other way.
Visa and MasterCard as well.
Yeah. They have all of that carrying cost of all of that infrastructure, and they can't go the other way. They can't disentangle
and all this
themselves.
is free as well. The Lightning Network doesn't take 2% of the top of every single transaction for fees. That's like zero.
Yeah. And just back to the point about NFC on your phone, for a developer building in Flutter to go and access an Android device's NFC chip and build a Lightning wallet that allows tap to pay someone. So you've got, let's say, tap on glass. So I tap my phone against your phone, and we've both got NFC. We can do a Lightning payment that way, right? Because the NFC can pass through the address information. 2 junior developers on Flutter can build that and a Lightning wallet using open source code without asking anyone permission, right? And it won't be an expensive build. You can probably do it for under 100K. Amazing. You can't fucking do that with cards. Not a chance. Like it's going to cost you a year of dev time and probably 2 million rand in licenses and all kinds of nonsense. Like it's dead. It's dead. It's a fucking dinosaur.
What I keep saying to everyone I meet is this technology, it's already there and it's already usable. You just have to adopt it. It's like learning to drive a car. I mean, it's already there. It's not like we're talking about the future here. It's there already. Just start using it. It's so easy. I mean, how much does your rand or dollar need to decrease in value before you're going to wake up?
Okay, but hang on. The rand and dollar might be decreasing value, but Bitcoin is increasing in value. And apparently that's a bad thing, according to fiat economists. Apparently deflation is going to kill us all, and it's far more dangerous than COVID. We got a lot to fear from deflation. What do you think?
So my in my Twitter handle, one of the things is it says advocate for deflation. And I think that deflation will be awesome. Just imagine you're sitting in with 10,000 rand in your bank account. Next month, next year, it's worth 12,000 instead of 8,000. I mean, in what world is that a bad thing?
And well, let's use a realistic example. Sorry to interrupt you, but let's say you're sitting with 10,000 sats in your wallet, in your Bitcoin wallet, and your purchasing power last year versus this year has gone up by a factor of 5, right? You can buy 5 times more stuff with those 10,000 sats.
I mean,
whereas the rand has gone down.
Yeah, or you've spent half of it, but you still have the equivalent amount of buying power left that you started with. That's another way to think of it. I just want to clarify if there are some Keynesians listening here. Most mainstream or Keynesian economic textbooks don't spend a lot of time on inflation. Not that I would know, I haven't read all of them, but it's usually just inflation is bad, and then there's apparently England.
You mean deflation?
UK. Deflation, yes. Yeah, deflation is bad. So apparently
they love inflation.
But the UK experimented with deflation in the early 1920s before they went back onto the gold standard, and it was disastrous for the economy. But what they did is in World War I, they expanded the money supply, so they increased it, and then they decided, no, we need to decrease it. So they took all the money, or they started taking liquidity out of the economy. So there was, say, 20 or say £1 trillion worth of money circulating. They wanted to bring that back down to 500 billion. So I mean, that kind of deflation, I mean, that is it's common sense that would destroy any economy. I mean, if you're taking liquidity out of the economy and there's no more money left or less money left than there was previously, I mean, obviously that's going to be bad. That's going to have devastating effects. What we're talking about here with deflation with Bitcoin we're not decreasing the amount of Bitcoin there is. The amount of goods compared to the amount of Bitcoin is just increasing. So the amount of money or currency will stay the same, and the amount of goods compared to that currency is increasing. So that is also deflation, but there's no argument that how that could be bad for an economy. It doesn't exist. Sorry, that was a bit of a rant.
No, but so it's worth ranting over because it's asinine. Yeah. Like the fact that you as an individual, your purchasing power is increasing. For someone to come and tell me that it must be bad for me, that person must either be a fiat academic or a journalist because they're fucking retarded. Like, how is that
exactly
bad? You know?
Yes.
Like, my purchasing power is going up. So, okay, so the merchant is receiving less money for goods and services, but that money he's receiving can purchase more stuff. So if it is going down at a slow rate, like you're talking about, like slow incremental appreciation of purchasing power, if the amounts of goods and services that it can buy are increasing, it's good for everyone. You know, everyone who's saving. The only people it's bad for is spenders who haven't got the fiscal discipline to save money. But the current
and you don't want those people spending. You don't want people spending on stuff they don't need, because that is bad for everyone and for the environment.
Yes.
I mean, how Keynesians can, on the one hand, try and increase the amount of money circulating, or the in the to increase demand and spending, and on the other hand, putting in uh, 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 carbon credits. I mean, that's insane. So on the one hand, you're actively fucking up the environment by increasing consumption with bullshit that's created, and on the other hand, you're taxing people for doing it. I mean, it's insane.
Yeah,
Oh.
you're screwing the environment on both sides. And then you're
Yes.
acting like you're the good guy. I don't know if you guys have seen Silicon Valley. I've only recently started watching the show. Phenomenal, great. But in like one of the later seasons, Gavin Belson, who's like the main bad guy, he launches a ethics school for tech called Tethics. And he like has this whole thing. He's like the biggest asshole. He screws everyone over. He's got like no ethics, but then he launches a school for ethics. And this is exactly what like modern day fiat environmentalism is all about. It's all driven by fiat economy, or the fiat economy, where they're just printing money, which cheap money leads to the overconsumption of plastics, for example. Like if your purchasing power, if you had a unit of accounts that that incentivize you to delay consumption, you wouldn't buy plastics. You wouldn't buy single-use plastic bottles. You buy a metal bottle and you'd reuse that, because you don't want to waste your precious Bitcoin, your precious sats, on throwing pieces of plastic away all the time, because there's a very limited supply of Bitcoin. It's stupid. So the entire economy would rearrange itself around things of value. So these fiat economists like Gavin Belson are talking one side, saying like, oh yeah, we're the ethical ones, like look at us, look at Greta, you know, like this is we but at the same token, they're the central banks who are literally running the printing presses, which is causing environmental destruction. And it's got so absurd, the lunatics are running the asylum, that central banks are now talking about climate change and environmentalism, when all of the environmental destruction is actually as a result of their fucking policies. It's
Exactly.
but it boggles the mind. But
Yeah.
like I said, the lunatics are running the asylum.
No, but and also they're passing along the ball, because everybody's trying to be the best person on CNN, and what they're doing, like we talked about Europe earlier, with trying to get rid of coal-powered plants and nuclear powered plants. Lord knows why. But the thing is, they then import energy from other countries next to them, who are producing that, but they're producing that power from environmentally concerning resources, meaning they're still consuming the power that they hate in the first place. It's just
virtue signaling.
It's an oxymoron on like just a mass scale. You know, it's
just pure virtue signal, man. This is what it has become distilled down to. Like those who produce least and add the least value are the ones out there acting like they produce the most and add the most value. And those who produce the most amount of value are shunned. Now, this is the upside down world we're living in, but the pendulum's got to swing. It can't remain like this. And this is why Bitcoin is so important, because Bitcoin is truth. You cannot cheat energy. And Bitcoin at the end of the day is energy. Like it's a distillation. It's an energy token, really. And those days will be over for the fiat maxis, because like you can't keep bullshitting like this forever. You can't go on CNN and say, look what a good person I am. Like I bought some carbon credits and my ESG score is really high. When in actual fact, you're just buying cheap Russian gas and throwing plastics in the sea and choking out the turtles. Like eventually it'll fall apart.
Yeah, so let's try and complete the arc here, because everybody wants an arc in a movie except anything to do with the Avengers. But so how does Bitcoin fit into Austrian economics? Why is this so relevant? Why has Bitcoin made Austrian economics famous again? You can answer.
So the Austrians have always their main. So firstly, they're against any form of, well, mostly interventionism, and Austrian that are for free market and for small government. And the Austrians have always seen the expansion of credit and the control of money by the government as evil and oppressive and unfair and damaging to human prosperity. So most of the Austrian writers have at some stage in their careers, try to come up with some way of taking the power back from the government, if you want to call it that, and the banks. So according to Austrians, it's just ethically wrong for a group or a person or an institution to have the ability to create money out of thin air. There's an ethical problem connected to property rights with that. So the Austrians have always tried. They used to be heavy into the gold standard and trying to bring that back. But I mean, you got with us just growing up, you know that in the 70s and 80s and 90s, that was never even on the table. So Bitcoin is the first time where the light can be seen at the end of the tunnel. Bitcoin has given new hope and fervor to Austrian economists and libertarians across the world. That's why you would see Bitcoin, Austrian economics, and libertarianism. It's always that's all. Those three things are almost in every person's Twitter handle these days. It's those three things just go hand in hand because Bitcoin finally enables the Austrian theories and the libertarian ideas to have a foothold and to have a way to make a comeback from statism and fiatism, if you want to call it that.
Yeah. So on the one
Amen.
side, let's try and summarize that for people. So on the one side, you got this fiat system with endless money printing, and Bitcoin is the antithesis of that, meaning people know exactly what the schedule of supply will be, meaning they can structure their business around that. And on the demand side, that's a bit more erratic. So on the demand side, people try to determine based on that supply what they can do, but how can we tie that together? How can we title that to say it's much more freer? Or is it not? Is it just on the supply side that we're talking about?
So Bitcoin is decentralized software. It's not controlled by anyone. So the main thing is if you have rands. So there's $1 trillion rand in existence today. Now the government goes and they create another $1 trillion rand and spend it. Now there's $2 trillion rand in existence. So the value of the citizens or the people that had the rands previously, their rands are now worth half of what it was. Okay, I'm over exaggerating with the numbers here. Now next year they're printing another $1 trillion. Now you're a third of what you started with. Bitcoin stops that. So whatever there is, you have that, and that value that you have is going to be one of 21 million if you own a full Bitcoin. And when you spend it, so if governments has to be on that standard on the Bitcoin standard as well, that would curtail their spending, because once you spend the Bitcoin, it's gone. You can't create more Bitcoin out of thin air. So once you spend rands, or the government or the banks spend rands, they can just make more. It's like monopoly money to them. They're the bank in monopoly. They can just put out more as much as they want until the people come start a revolution. Bitcoin stops that whole process, and it puts the power back into the people, because now you have to, if you actually want to get tax and or money to spend as a government, you now have to tax the people. You can't create it out of thin air anymore, and that gives an amount of power back to the people, which ties in with governments and political theory and all that stuff.
Yeah, so that's a good point. So there's no central authority controlling it. The supply is scheduled. You know exactly not exactly, because you're trying to aggregate in 10 minutes, but it depends. But you can, over a long term, say it's 10 minutes, know exactly how much is coming out in terms of supply. And maybe the link we say and how people and Austrians connect to this is to say the supply cannot be affected by the demand, meaning that's the connection. Maybe that's the way we say it.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree?
Yes, yeah. Well, so no matter what the demand is, you can't increase the supply, and that's one of the reasons for the crazy price swings in Bitcoin. If you're against the volatility in that, so with any other product or good or currency, the more the demand gets, the more the supply gets, because it gets more expensive, and then people start creating more. With Bitcoin, that's impossible. So as the supply gets more and more, the demand gets more and more, the supply stays the same, so then the price just goes up. There's no
Yeah.
increase of supply to counter the demand. And when it goes down again, if just like take anything like eggs, if the demand for eggs goes down again, the people are going to create so much eggs. I mean, they're going to sell the chickens, and then after a year or whatever, there's going to be less eggs and the price is going to stabilize again. That also can't happen. So that's why you get these erratic swings of Bitcoin up and down. And for now, it seems erratic because Bitcoin is still so ridiculously small compared to what it's trying to be. I mean, just the bond market in the world is 300 trillion. Bitcoin is now plus minus 1 trillion. If
Yeah.
I mean,
So
I think I heard someone say today that total, let's call it total money and assets in the world, you're looking at plus minus 900 trillion. So, I mean, I'm not saying Bitcoin is going to reach that total value, but if it reaches 5% of that value, you're looking at $20 million a Bitcoin.
yeah,
That's definitely possible in the future.
what do you
Such
guys
a bear.
reckon? What do you guys reckon is going to happen over the next year if the $3.5 trillion is printed? Another 3.5. What do you think is happening next year?
Price of everything is going to go up.
Yeah, we're looking at minimum of 10% inflation around the whole world. I mean, it's already there. You can just look at the prices you're paying for everything, and look at any media article from even mainstream media, Wall Street Journal, anywhere. I mean, all the real prices of things are increasing 10% plus. So, I mean, let's hold thumbs or hope that it doesn't increase even more, because I mean the destruction of that is intense.
I mean, at the end of the day, we have no control over the matter. All we can do is take steps to protect ourselves. You know, like, it is what it is, unfortunately. And if you're a normie who doesn't, you know, who thinks that everything that's happening now is justified and governments need to take drastic action, man, you got a lot of pain coming for you. If you've got,
if I hadn't found Bitcoin 3 years ago and was invested in it and had the amount of conviction that I had that it's just going up from here, I mean, I think that Plan B stock to flow model is going to be close to correct. The reasons why it's complicated.
It's correct until proven wrong.
But I still, never mind his model. The broad price bracket that he sees Bitcoin in, I tend to agree with that. I think we can be looking at 100,000 rand at the end of the year, and then 250,000 rand in 3 years, and then after that we're going to have a spike up to $1 million, and that'll be just. Did I say rand? I mean dollars. But that's just going to be institutional and governments coming on board. I mean, me and you buying our 10,000 and 20,000 and 100,000 a year and there and trying to be a full coiner is a joke compared to the amount of money out there that institutions and governments control. And I thought it was going to take until 2024 for them to start coming or to get traction. But I mean, with MicroStrategy and a lot of other companies now starting to buy the Bitcoin themselves, and even a government with El Salvador, and a lot of other governments starting to talk about implementing Bitcoin. I mean, this is happening faster than we're thinking. And the thing is,
sorry on that point, Handre. We saw MicroStrategy July last year intention, August execution, and then by February there was just a clamor, right? Everything was crazy. We knew things were a bit crazy, but that's how quick it was for companies. And I'm with you. I thought it was like 2024 companies. Now imagine the first entrant from a bond market, whoever they are. Imagine that first entrance, and
Because remember, those
they
people
set
are
the precedent.
they're sitting with negative interest rates at this stage. I mean, it's just a matter of time before before they start. Even if just 5% of the bond market start buys, I mean, you had Greg Voss on. Even if just 5% of the current bond market goes into Bitcoin, you're looking at a Bitcoin price of $10 million or something like that. It's insane. I mean, um, so yeah, I'm very bullish. But what I wanted to say earlier is, if it wasn't for that, like the normal fiat people still living and trying to make a living and going to work every day and trying to saving and investing in whatever they are investing that's not Bitcoin, I would have moved to a farm a long time ago and just or probably committed suicide or something. Because how do you see the future planning out for yourself? I mean, do you just see the government growing and everything becoming a fuck up and everything becoming more expensive and you earning less? I mean, what's the end game for the world without Bitcoin? It's just a disaster.
It's bleak. It's global communism. Like, the government just grows and grows and grows until it consumes everything like a fucking plague of locusts, which it really is. And offers no value, much like a locust. And that's kind of where it ends, like. So luckily, Bitcoin is a anchor on that, and it brings people back to rationality, because there's game theory that plays out between governments who now have to choose: do I cheat this cabal, this cartel? Do I now go and buy Bitcoin? Or does the threat of America invading me still hold water? I mean, people think that threat's not as credible anymore with what happened in Afghanistan. I mean, whether that happened on purpose or not, still sends a signal.
Let's see if they go onto the Bitcoin standard now, because they hate the dollar as well.
I mean, they don't hate all that free swag that got left behind for them. They got a whole bunch of US.
But so you see, some countries are adopting Bitcoin. El Salvador already has. Brazil now, they're making noise. Tonga. I mean, there's a lot of other countries that have politicians inside advocating for Bitcoin at this stage. So there's definitely got to be more than one. Okay, I don't think there's anyone in the world that would disagree with that statement. And as the other governments are growing,
Steve Hanke would disagree with you.
Yeah. But as other governments are locusts eating away at those countries' economy, the companies that do adopt Bitcoin, they're going to grow and prosper, and eventually the productive people from those countries are just going to move to the countries that did adopt Bitcoin. And for one up, I would love to play some kind of role in the Western Cape independence movement regarding adopting a Bitcoin standard in case the Western Cape does become independent. I think that would be. Then we're gonna look at one of the most prosperous states in the world on the southern tip of Africa with the best weather. Some people would disagree with that.
They can fuck off. We got the best weather.
But yeah, I see that happening. Potentially in 10 years' time, we can have an independent Western Cape with on the Bitcoin standard. It would be awesome.
If the Western Cape goes independent without going on the Bitcoin standard, it's doomed to fail. It won't work, because you will just have to play the game that the rest of the countries around the world play. And if you don't have scale, you're going to get screwed. You're going to have to be dollarized. You've got all these aggressive states around you. Well, only on one side. But if we have to leave the rest of South Africa, you can best believe it won't be peaceful, unfortunately, because the ANC won't let that happen. And their capacity to deliver violence to the Western Cape in like an organized manner might not be very big, but is what it is. But if the Western Cape doesn't go onto a Bitcoin standard, they're just doomed to repeat the failures of the past and the mistakes of the past. So this is I think it's vital that we start, speaking to people in the independence movement to get this point across to them that, like, listen, guys, you need to think about Bitcoin, because this can change the game for you completely. It can really outsize your influence. You can punch above your weight, because the Western Cape can really be the Singapore of Africa, hopefully without the dictatorship. That'll be nice. But, we'll have to see how that plays out. But one thing I want to touch on before we wrap the show up is something that I've been kind of mulling over for the last while, and we all get excited about the price of Bitcoin going up and number go up, and we've spent a large amount of time delving into it. But then, we speak to Herman about this up in Mossel Bay. He's trying to get a similar vibe to Bitcoin Beach going. He's paying some of his coaches in his surf charity. He's paying them in sats, and they've got some vendors on board in the local community who are accepting Bitcoin in payment. It's getting a little bit of a circular economy going on there. It's very cool to see happening.
That's awesome.
One of the biggest issues he's facing is the education issue. Is that people don't quite in the townships don't understand Bitcoin because they haven't got access to education. But when I speak to people and they say, look, it's complicated. People in the townships don't have education. They're not going to get it. I'm like, listen, they have the biggest need for Bitcoin out of anyone, because number go up matters more to them than it does to any one of us, because they are not part of the educated class, as it were, that can walk into high paying jobs. These guys are earning 10,000 and less a month, unfortunately, if you look at the national statistics, and they don't have access to assets that appreciate in value where the money printer goes brr. Like they don't own the real estate, they don't own the houses they live in, they don't have stock portfolios or large stock portfolios that go up when the money printer runs. It's no surprise the correlation that Saab printed a whole bunch of money, monetized a whole bunch of debt, and then the stock market went up 80%. Like there's the correlation and causation here. But people living in townships don't own those assets. So all they have is all of the side effects of inflation and none of the benefits that is asset inflation. So they just get screwed over double. Their only savings they have is in cash in a Capitec or a Time Bank bank account, which gives you 3 to 5% a year. These guys are having what little amount they're able to preserve as savings, just having it hollowed out by inflation. And this is a fucking travesty. And so these guys need Bitcoin more than anyone else. So, I don't expect you to have an answer for this really. It's more like a discussion, but how do we how do we evangelize and get Bitcoin into the hands of the people who need it most, which I think are the poor of the world?
Yeah, so let me use I think I've got an answer for this, or an idea. So using Bitcoin and from the education perspective is, to me, like driving a car. At this stage, not a lot of people knows how to drive, how to use Bitcoin. It's the same as when Henry Ford started producing mass vehicles. No one knew how to drive it. But at some stage, people started realizing, geez, driving is much better than walking. So I should learn how to drive, because then I don't have to walk anymore. So that's going to be that education will, to a large degree, take care of itself. And also with apps like Lightning, you don't need to have your like Moon on the Lightning network. You don't have to, or like Strike, if that say comes to South Africa, you don't need to know Bitcoin. You only need an app on your phone. You have to click 3 times and then you have it. It's so easy that, in my analogy of driving, would be like rather getting onto the bus, or onto a train. It's better than walking, but it's so much easier than driving yourself or learning how to drive. It's not necessary to do that. And then the other part is
just on that point, Handre, before we move on.
Yeah. Okay.
But, that is all well and good, right? But that relies on custodial services for that to happen, right? Mm-hmm. And you run the risk of those individuals being rug pulled by a custodial service, and not because the operators are nefarious, but probably because the government will come and shut them down or regulate them and rug pull them that way. So that's one factor.
No, yeah, you're right, Ricky and Handre, you're right. And Ricky and I have been deliberating on this for some time, and we're not going to outline it because some arsehole will steal our IP. But I think we got some things will come out in the future, hopefully. But nonetheless, let's just say we didn't do anything. Banks will inevitably, and financial institutions will bring Bitcoin into their holdings and provide this to people with a bank account or whatever, and say that, and allow them to buy 30 Rand of Bitcoin. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. Yep. But that's where Ricky's alluding to. It's going to be the custodial route. And we need to find out a way. And that's fine. That's fine initially, because you can't let the uneducated person. I mean, this is a bigger. I mean, the person that doesn't understand Bitcoin, and that's a lot of people. That's most people. That uneducated person to custody Bitcoin, and that's what Bitvice has been struggling. We want to help people custody immediately, but it's a hard thing. But with millions of people, you need to provide them an easy to understand wallet to custody, like Luna does. Cool, they do that, but there's other problem. We all understand the problems with that. So we got to figure out a way, a backdoor attack using open source code to allow people permissionlessly, without permission, to keep Bitcoin there and withdraw it anywhere they want without anybody's permission. And that's the perfect balance.
Yes,
that's what we need to do.
So I have a little bit of a different thinking about the whole hyper Bitcoinization or Bitcoin's future in the whole world, if you want to call it that way. So I see people using Bitcoin as a way of payment daily. Like I'm gonna mention Moon Wallet again now. I have Breeze on my phone as well. It works fast, easy. You can download it. It's 12 megabytes, and you can send someone whatever amount within a few seconds immediately, without any custody, without an ID, without a password, with nothing. I can't see any government, never mind the South African government, stopping people from using that or banning it or whatever. It's physically impossible. You can't stop people from using the internet or from email. I mean, but so you have to get people to use that technology that's unbannable. And the way that I see that happening in the future is shops and sellers or producers of good starting to accept this, they would, which let's call it, it's got to be a smarter individual who understands Bitcoin and sees the value proposition. Say a guy that owns a spaza shop or a macro kind of shop. What do you call that? Those shops that sell the stuff on big scale in the townships.
Spaza shop.
There's a bigger one, like a cash and carry. The guy that owns the cash and carry in Mossel Bay. You need to get that guy to understand that Bitcoin is better than rands, and then he needs to start accepting payments from Moon Wallet at a discount, because he will because if he accepts that payments, firstly it's probably not gonna show up on his tax records. I mean, that can be taxed or stopped by the government in the future maybe, but for adoption's sake, he can say, I accept Bitcoin, but it's 10% less if you pay in Bitcoin.
That can work.
It could work. It can happen. Work. And then the people will go, oh shit, I would have paid 100 rand, it's only 90 rand. Let me find out what this Bitcoin thing is. And then as soon as they start using it, they can use it between each other as well. And the underground economy will bustle and grow so quickly with that. It'll be like a lightning, like a
it's right, like COVID.
Sorry, but you absolutely. You're talking about an educated merchant, right? Which is very far and few between, in line with 8 billion people on this earth. But you saw El Salvador bank more people on Bitcoin in 1 month than the banks could in decades, through forced incentives. And they were forced to say, we'll give you $30, we're going to KYC you, you'll have Bitcoin, it's they custody it, the government, all these things. And I'm saying you got to look at the top-down principle of how these institutions and banks work, where they're already holding all these clients already. How do you convert those? And they will inevitably bring Bitcoin into pension funds, into all these things. And when they bring into pension funds or unit trusts, these institutions have to custody that Bitcoin on behalf of investors. There's no other way around, unless Bitcoin has come up with some amazing thing that we're not aware of. But then that flows down to the user, and they're going to offer these same mechanisms, just like the El Salvadorian government did as well. And they'll custody it on their behalf, and they're able to reapothecate that in some form or manner. And what I'm saying is we have to figure out a way to do a backdoor attack to them, to bring some kind of open source wallet So these banks aren't ready yet. They're going to go, okay, we'll use that. But nonetheless, people can still take their Bitcoin anywhere to their Breeze wallet if they want to, once they become educated. And unfortunately, I think that is the reality we're facing on most people. And hopefully we can educate as many other people as possible. And that's that's the job.
Brandon,
that'll definitely happen now. I agree with you.
But Bitcoin up until now has been a grassroots movement, which has been ground up, bottom up. Why do you think it'll suddenly flip around and be top down? Like
no. I'm not saying flip around. I'm saying that is, we've got the ground up movements, and we're going to have to fight this top down movements, and that's where I'm saying we're going to meet in between.
We're going to absolutely have to fight that, because banks are going to do what banks do, which is try to corrupt the system, and they're going to try to establish seigniorage so that they can be the ones getting the first drink out the pipe of the Cantillon tap, right? Like that's what they try to do. They'll try to rehypothecate. They'll play all kinds of games. So this is why by the time banks adopt Bitcoin, number go up has started as a plateau in the S curve, right? Because these guys can be very slow to adopt it. Like Standard Bank is not adopting Bitcoin. But there's compliance, there's all this stuff. They just have too much to lose because there's a neck to choke, and governments will apply pressure to the banks first. So they'll be the last motherfuckers to adopt Bitcoin. So the approach has to be, how do you get it into the hand of the man of the street? Maybe custodial is halfway to the answer. It probably is, and we know it reduces friction to onboarding. But people who have a dire need for something will be those who will figure it out the fastest. Like if you walk around on I went to Argentina a couple of years back, and there's money changers everywhere. They're just like the Cambio guys. They're changing money. They work out 3 different exchange rates for you, on the spot in their head. These guys didn't finish high school. Necessity is the mother of all invention. These guys will figure it out. Little old ladies
who are
selling.
They don't those guys on the street. They're smart.
They're smart, bro. They're way more savvy than the rest of us. They'll figure this shit out. But the question is it's just, how do you light that spark? And you've got to get first off, you probably have to do Bitcoin in native language, right? You got to do Bitcoin in Xhosa and Zulu and Pedi and Venda and Tsonga, and so these guys can really understand it in their own language. And then you just need to place the spark, man. And as soon as they understand, number go up, and you got to educate them on what scams are, how to spot scams. Probably another good one. But I really believe that if we can get Bitcoin into the hands of the poorest of the poor in South Africa and start driving that revolution, we're going to improve more lives.
I think
anything else.
If you want to do that, targeting, I think you've mentioned it before with someone on your podcast, targeting the taxi industry and the expat industry, the guys sending money back to Zimbabwe, and then the shop owners, the cash and carry kind of shop owners. If you have those 3 groups, if you can orange pull a couple of people in those groups, then I think you're going to see mass scale adoption quickly. Yes, I hope that can happen in South Africa, man. That'll be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's going to happen gradually, then suddenly, you saw what happened in Nigeria. It went from very low levels of adoption to over 30% in the space of a couple of months, because they
out of necessity,
what's happening
unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah. And if we see 20% inflation in South Africa, best believe people are going to be flocking to Bitcoin in higher numbers than they are now. We don't know how much higher, but they'll definitely be there in higher numbers. And South Africans are for the last 5 years, we rank in the top 3 countries in the world by Google searches for Bitcoin. People are interested in Bitcoin, but I don't have an answer for why adoption hasn't been big in the township economy yet. Unfortunately, I would love to see it.
All those bloody scams, man.
Scams. Yeah. Anyway, guys, I think we're going to leave it there. Brandon, anything more from your side? Okay, cool. Before we sign out, Handre, before we sign you out, we just do a quick plug for Bitvice. So for those of you who don't know yet, Bitvice is mine and Brandon's company. We are a self-custody only Bitcoin exchange. We help you get set up with your own wallet, be it a multi-sig, hardware wallet, or mobile wallet on your phone. We send your sats directly to you. We've also got some cool integrations coming, which allow for the movement of funds much more easily and quickly, so no more tedious EFTs. And you can stack sats directly to your own hardware wallet. It's going to be very cool. We're very excited. that's pretty much it from the Bitvice side. Also, if you want to get this video in audio format, we have a podcast also called By the Horns, which is just this in audio. Find us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. It comes out normally a day or two after the video version. So normally on a Friday, you'll get the podcast. And go like and subscribe. Do all the things. Get us up in the ratings. Go leave us a review. Even if you hate the podcast, that tell me that I swear too much and Brandon's head's too shiny, go leave us a review. It'll help us get found. That's it. Handre, once again, love having you on the show. Great to talk about this stuff. Thank you for joining us once again. And tell me, where can people listening track down your work? Because I know you write prolifically.
They can find me on Twitter. My handle is Handre, like my name, and then a V. And then from there, you'll be able to navigate to my Medium page, where I have a couple of articles that hopefully you will find interesting.
I hear you catfishing people. I hear you catfishing maxis on Twitter these days, acting like you're a hot female.
Yeah, that's a discussion for another day.
Good. On that bombshell. All right, guys, we'll leave it there. Handre, once again, thank you so much. Brandon, as always, thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Have a good evening,
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. Bye.
Bye.
Cheers.